So firstly, I did want to get into a brief about me, and the reason why I wanted to speak a bit about myself is I wanted you to make sense of why you should pay attention to what I'm going to be speaking about today. So firstly, I have 8 years of experience in IT recruitment, 4 years running my own recruitment business, 4 years working for other recruitment agencies. So the tips I'm sharing with all of you folks today is based on my experience in the recruitment industry, specifically recruiting in IT. For technical as well as non-technical roles. So what I'm sharing with you today is a realistic, real deal kind of an outlook on utilizing recruiters. It's not based on some book I read or something I saw on TV. This is based on my own personal experiences. I am one of the most active and well-known IT recruiters on LinkedIn here in Toronto. As of today, I have built out a following solely on LinkedIn of around 23,000 plus followers because I post a lot of content applicable to the struggles of job seekers from a recruiter's standpoint. A lot of people have commented on how relevant my advice is. And I'm also one of the only IT recruiters here in Toronto, as far as I know, approved for LinkedIn live broadcasting. So for those of you watching, I definitely wanted to let you know that every week on Wednesdays at 11 a.m., I do a weekly live stream where I go live on LinkedIn as well as YouTube, Facebook, and also Periscope for those of you who might be on Periscope. And I speak about job search topics and I answer your questions live. So you're most welcome to tune in. All my social media links, by the way, are on my website listed there. So www.deankulaweera.com. And I'd love to see you on my live stream, which is on Wednesdays, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone. All right. So tip number one, understand how recruiters work. So this is probably the most important part, folks, because in order for you to understand how to effectively utilize recruiters, you need to have at least a general understanding about how recruiters operate. Right? Because if you don't understand how recruiters operate, that's what leads to all the misunderstandings, right? Especially, and most of you have probably experienced this whole situation with recruiters, right? So look, understand the extent to which a recruiter can assist you, you being the job seeker. Because the better your understanding of the extent to which a recruiter can assist you, the better your understanding of how the relationship will unfold and the realistic expectations of the relationship. So understanding how recruiters operate will help you with that realistic outlook and set those realistic expectations. Now, the most common thing I hear from job seekers and most common complaints, and a lot of you might be posting this on LinkedIn as well. Dean, recruiters are not helping me find a job. Like, isn't it a recruiter's sole job to help me find a job? That's the expectation, right? Now, the reality is that recruiters actually are not responsible for finding you a job, folks. If you're taking notes, you want to write this down because this is a very important distinction and should form the foundation of your understanding of your relationship with recruiters. The expectation is, yeah, the recruiters are supposed to help me find a job. The reality is it's not the recruiter's job to find you a job. The recruiter's job, the sole purpose of a recruiter is to help find talent for organizations. Very important distinction. If you're taking notes, again, I can't stress this enough. Make sure you write that down. It's the recruiter's job to find talent for organizations. Now, this is the case for staffing agency recruiters, right? Recruitment agencies. An agency is employed by an organization when, for whatever reason, they can't find talent on their own. So they want to utilize the services of an agency that goes out into the marketplace, into the job market to find, amazing folks such as yourself. That's the recruiter's job. That's the staffing agency's job. Now, in corporate recruitment, pretty much the same story. Of course, it's slightly different in the sense that their client is the internal hiring managers at the organization. But it's still the same story, right, folks? Because ultimately, it's the hiring manager. They approach the corporate recruiter. They're like, hey, we really need to find XYZ skill set for such and such project. Can you folks, go out and find us some people for the role? So in either case, folks, whether it's a corporate recruiter or a staffing agency recruiter, that is the case. That is the key distinction you need to make. And the key thing you need to understand. So again, you can have that realistic expectation from your relationship with recruiters. So remember that this point, the recruiter's job, the sole purpose of a recruiter is not to find you a job. The sole point of a recruiter is to help the organizations find talent. And definitely you are the talent or you are the potential talent. So I'm not saying that recruiters don't care about you and they don't want to hear from you. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the function of the role might be slightly different from what your expectations might be. So this is why recruiters, who say they're going to keep in touch, they might not keep in touch. They might not consistently, come back to you, even though they save your resume on their database. The reason why is their focus is ultimately on what's actively the requirement right now? What are their clients actively looking for right now? So very important point, folks. Make sure you keep that in mind. And look, the reality for the job seeker is, look, for you, the job search starts with your need for a job, right? And again, I'm explaining this to kind of help you understand this clear distinction. And the reality for the recruiters, which is individuals such as myself and others out there, the recruitment cycle starts with my clients or the organization's need for talent. So this is where the miscommunication occurs, right? So if as a job seeker, you need to understand this distinction of what the actual role of a recruiter is. And understanding this, you'll be able to firstly prioritize which recruiters you need to be getting in touch with, which I'm going to be getting into shortly, and setting realistic expectations for yourself in terms of what to expect from your relationship with the recruiter. Now, tip number 2, getting into communication with the right recruiters. Not all recruiters, folks, are created equal, right? And not all recruiters are going to be, able to, are not. It's not going to make sense for you to get in touch with every single recruiter out there, right? Megan says, in 6 seconds, how do the recruiters find talent? Yeah, so in 6 seconds, Megan, the recruiters find talent by matching skill set to their clients' needs. I think that was less than 6 seconds. But yeah, tip number 2, folks, getting into communication with the right recruiters. Not all recruiters out there are going to be the ones that you need to be getting in touch with, following up with, or even chasing out there. So that's what I'm going to be talking about, and this is very important. Tip number 2, getting into communication with the right recruiters. So just a few tips I wanted to share with all of you. And look, so firstly, you need to seek out specialist recruiters. Specialists, whether staffing, specialists in staffing agencies or even in corporate as well. Sorry, I thought I saw a great comment here. So Diana says, indeed, the recruiter's job is to find the best talent for the employer. As a career coach, I often hear job seekers that they want to get recruiters to find them a job. Yeah, exactly, Diana. And shout out to Diana. And that's exactly pretty much the situation, right? And I see some other questions here. To the questions shortly, folks, but keep those questions coming. So look, seek out the specialist recruiters. Now, what do I mean by specialist recruiters? Well, there's recruiters out there who specialize in your field, your skill set, or even your industry. And there might be specialist recruiters who entirely focus on your space, right? And don't restrict this solely to your industry. So for example, maybe you're in IT, maybe you're a software developer, and your thought is, okay, I just need to get in touch with IT recruiters out there. You definitely want to be getting in touch with IT recruiters, right? Now, that being said, not all IT recruiters will actively be recruiting or frequently be recruiting for your skill set, right? A simple example of this I always use is, as an IT recruiter in the past, obviously I recruit for IT, right? But let's say, I sometimes have people, for example, SAP consultants who reach out to me asking for opportunities. But despite the fact that I am an IT recruiter, I don't frequently recruit in the SAP space. So it would not make sense for the SAP consultants to, follow up with me and chase after me and say, hey, Dean, what do you have going on? Do you have anything for me? I'm an SAP consultant, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So you need to make that, this is where you need to make that assessment and that judgment, folks, as to which recruiters you want to get in touch with and stay in touch with and follow up with and build those relationships with. Because if they don't actively recruit for your skill set, it might not make sense for you to keep in touch and put all that effort into following up and, staying in touch and all that stuff. Because look, all of you have a finite amount of time in the day. I want you to spend your time effectively, right? And getting in communication with and reaching out to and following up with the right recruiters. So first thing, definitely look for the specialists, those that specialize in your space, in your industry. Then you need to clarify whether they in fact or indeed recruit on your skill set, right? So remember, a recruiter's primary focus is on active positions when they're recruiting. So you need to be direct in your communication. Small talk is probably not very useful with recruiters for direct messaging. Outside of recruitment, obviously, when you're messaging someone, you probably don't want to get into, I'm looking for a job. You want to build that rapport and all of that. What I'm speaking about in this session, folks, is specifically in relation to recruiters. With recruiters, recruitment is a highly, highly specialized skill set. Outside of recruiting, recruiters don't do much of anything else. Like it's purely recruiting, right? Identifying the talent, identifying the need from the organization, identifying the talent, reaching out to the talent, qualifying the talent, presenting the talent, right? It's all has to do with the recruitment cycle. So it's a very specialized role and usually very high volume, especially if it's an agency or corporate recruiter, obviously, and especially if it's a corporate recruiter in a large size organization. And Diana can probably confirm that in the comments. It's a very high volume environment. So there's not much time for the chit chat and the small talk when you're messaging to figure out who you are, what you do, and whether they can actively help you with your skill set and what kind of roles you're looking for. So be direct in your communication, folks. You want to send a message to recruiters that are eye-catching, that captures their attention. But keeping in mind, and the reason why I mentioned that a recruiter's primary focus is on active positions is because that's what their focus is going to be on. So let's say right now I'm recruiting only on Java developer roles, right? Let's say I have 3-4 clients. All they're looking for is Java developers. And you're a business analyst and you reach out to me. There's no way I can assist you at least immediately. Recruiters don't create jobs, folks, right? Keep this in mind. Recruiters do not create jobs. My focus right now as a recruiter, if I'm only recruiting on Java development roles, is I'm assigned to find Java talent. That's what I'm going to be looking for. If you're a business analyst or a project manager or someone with a different skill set, I might not be able to assist you immediately because, again, my focus is on what I'm actively recruiting on, right? So keep that in mind. And usually the case when you're reaching out to recruiters, when you're messaging them, if it's a case that you're not reaching out about a specific role, maybe you're just trying to get an introductory message through the recruiter. If they don't respond, it could be simply that they're just not looking for your skill set, and they don't see the skill set fit between what you have and what their client's looking for. So just keep that in mind. And on the topic of your resume and your profile, keep in mind recruiters are highly keyword driven. So all those keywords associated with your industry, with your skill set, with your field, you need to make sure it's emphasized on your profile as well as on your resume. Recruiters mostly on LinkedIn, on the ATS, on their internal ATS or whatever system they use, or even on the job boards, right? Searching for candidates on Monster, Indeed, and all these platforms. Highly keyword driven. So if you're not mentioning, if your profile, if your resume is not mentioning those key skill sets, those keywords, those hard skills associated with your field, your resume, your LinkedIn profile might not capture attention. So always keep in mind the importance of this. You need to make sure that your profile and your skill and your LinkedIn profile as well as your resume highlights those aspects, right? So you need to understand. You need to make sure that it highlights that so that it captures the recruiter's attention when you reach out to them on LinkedIn, right? So if you send me a message on LinkedIn, right, obviously the recruiter might actually take the time to look at your profile. If it's an empty profile, a lot of people have empty profiles out there. All you do is list, your title, and you're not filling in the rest of your profile. You need to mention those key skill sets, those keywords associated with your skill set, with your field, with your role, and your industry, so that it captures attention, right? So keep that in mind. And also, by the way, in case I didn't emphasize it enough, in your messages to the recruiters, you need to highlight those keywords and those key skill sets associated with your profession or whatever skill set yours is. Again, very key driven, right? Key driven. Recruiters are very key driven. That's what's going to really capture their attention. So look, your ultimate aim should be to get on a phone call with the recruiter. So you need to send your LinkedIn message or send your email message, and in your email message or your LinkedIn message, you need to request a phone call. Now, as a side note, staffing agencies are very open to receiving unsolicited phone calls from job seekers. Every staffing agency out there is very open to basically candidates picking up the phone and calling on them to introduce themselves and asking to speak to a recruiter. I know this might seem a little bit out of your comfort zone, folks, for those of you watching, right? But I just wanted to put it out there. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Nothing wrong with you picking up the phone and calling a staffing agency to introduce yourself or asking to speak with a recruiter. Now, for corporate recruiters, it depends, right? If it's a corporate recruiter, again, who's highly specialized, like maybe it's a corporate IT recruiter or corporate recruiter responsible for whatever your niche is, definitely, because they're always looking to build a pipeline. Now, if it's a more general recruiter, a generalized recruiter, they recruit for everything. Maybe they might not be as open to such a conversation, but you gotta kind of make that assessment, right? So again, corporate recruiters, if it's a highly specialized recruiter, definitely they're probably more open to building those relationships. But within staffing agencies is usually highly specialized recruiters, right? For example, IT recruiters, and sometimes not just IT recruiters. It might be IT recruiters specializing in software developers, cloud, infrastructure, operations, all these. There might be highly specialized recruiters. So feel free to put in, I know it might take you to think kind of outside of your comfort zone, but no problem calling into a staffing agency to introduce yourself and ask to speak to a recruiter, folks. Very good muscle to build, right? But even if you're not doing that, let's say you just want to message them on LinkedIn, you want to send an email, your goal ultimately should lead to a phone call, folks. The selling, right, where you sell why you're a great candidate, why you bring such great value to the table. Very difficult to do this through LinkedIn messaging and through emails. You should always aim for a phone call. If your initial communication is a LinkedIn message or an email, you need to convert that into a phone call. So you need to actually request a phone call, right? So make sure you keep that in mind. And of course, in your communication, you need to find out if they're actively recruiting for your skill set, right? And this is a great question to ask if you're speaking to a recruiter over the phone is, whether or not indeed they are actively looking for your skill set right now. If not right now, maybe, you can keep in touch and they might be able to help you at some point in the future. But this is, again, why I prefer that all of you get on a phone call, right? And again, whatever avenue you use to get on that phone call, that's fine. Whether you want to use social media, you want to use LinkedIn, you want to use email, you want to use LinkedIn messaging, that's fine. But that should lead to a phone call, because on the phone call, you can actually gather more information. And what I mean by this is find out if they're recruiting for your skill set actively. Maybe the staffing, and if it's a staffing agency, maybe the recruiter you're speaking to might not be looking for your skill set, but staffing agencies might have different, and those other teams might be looking for someone such as yourself. So that's a question you definitely want to ask when you're on the phone. Now, aside from the brief introductory phone call, you definitely want to see if you can set up a further meeting or a conversation. So again, you can run them through your experience, your value, your projects, your accomplishments, your achievements in more detail. So beyond that initial introductory, quick few minutes initial introductory phone call, beyond that point, you want to see if you can schedule like a 15 to 20 minute phone call or even a video call so you can discuss who you are and what you bring to the table as a candidate in more detail, right? Now, tip number 3, and I already kind of touched on this, but don't waste time chasing the wrong tech recruiters, right? Not all recruiters are going to be able to help you. So again, seek out, and this is kind of a refresher, I guess a bit of a redundancy here, so my apologies for that, but seek out specialist recruiters, again, staffing agency or corporate. There might be, again, those staffing agency recruiters or corporate recruiters who specialize in your skill set. And sorry, I think there was that was a mistake. Never mind. My bad. Okay, yeah. So make good use of your time, folks. Don't waste time on the wrong IT recruiters. That's what I pretty much discussed up to this point. But as I also already mentioned, not all IT recruiters will be able to assist you, and so you need to establish early on whether in fact they can assist you. Do your research. Now, I think I saw someone in the comments ask, well, how do you best figure out, whether a recruiter could or could not help me with my skill set and with my field? Well, definitely, as I mentioned, the phone, if you're able to get into a phone conversation with them, that's a great way for you to have that conversation. But let's say your situation is, hey, Dean, I send recruiters messages, they don't respond, I can't get them on a phone call. How do I figure out if it makes sense for me to keep in touch? Well, look at their LinkedIn activity, folks, right? That's always a great point for you to look at, to kind of see their history of what kind of positions have they been posting. Look at their track record. What kind of positions have they been posting, right? Go to their LinkedIn activity, their post history, and you'll notice. And look, by the way, all recruiters eventually at some point are going to be posting their active positions on LinkedIn. So if you look at their previous posts, right, when you're researching these recruiters, it'll give you an idea of how frequently they might be recruiting on your skill set. If you're a Java developer and you're researching this recruiter, you're looking at their LinkedIn history, their activity history, and you notice that it doesn't look like they're posting a lot of software development roles. It looks like they're mostly recruiting on infrastructure roles. Well, what does that tell you? That tells you, maybe you still want to send them an introductory message, but maybe you might not want to aggressively follow up with them, because clearly, based on their history, they're only recruiting on infrastructure related roles. So this is where you get to do some legwork and some research, folks, right? So again, look at their LinkedIn history. That's a great clue as to whether or not, or what kind of roles they can potentially assist you with. So always take a look into that and do that legwork and do your research. And again, if I haven't made this clear already, definitely place a higher priority on staying in communication with and staying in touch with recruiters who recruit for your skill set. Because again, that's where you want to make maximum use of your time in regards to recruiters. You want to focus on those that have a high chance of presenting you with opportunities that are indeed a match for your skill set and your field, right? Also, you need, based on that'll help you determine if follow-up makes sense. And what I mean by this is, let's say you figure, you're doing your research on this recruiter. You see that pretty much every day they're posting like new roles about, like, new Java development roles, and you're a Java developer. Well, what does that tell you? That probably tells you, following up with this recruiter every week might make sense, right? Because it looks like they're only recruiting on software dev roles. And you notice that most of these dev roles are Java, right, for the most part. And you see that they're posting about these almost every day. So you might want to send follow-up messages every week. I'd say even maybe every couple of days, right? Because again, based on the frequency with which they're recruiting on your skill set, that's how you can determine how often you should follow up. Now, if it's less than that, maybe they're recruiting on a wide range of tech roles, right? Maybe they're doing some dev recruitment, some infrastructure recruitment, the PM recruitment, BA roles, and it's a whole mix of different types of stuff. Then maybe it might make sense to maybe follow up with them every 2-3 weeks or so, right? If they don't respond to your initial message. So doing that research and the legwork alone, folks, will help you kind of prioritize who you want to follow up with and how frequently you want to follow up with them, right? Now, tip number 4, let's say you score a meeting with a staffing agency, right? And whether it's a staffing agency or corporate, these tips still apply. So in your meeting with the recruiter, look, you got to treat the meeting as if it's an actual interview, right? And treat it like it's an actual video or on-site or phone interview, especially if it's a corporate recruiter, because obviously the corporate recruiter is internal to the organization that you're interested in working for. So it's going to speak volumes, their impression of you. So keep that in mind. But even if it's a staffing agency, folks, you need to take the interview very seriously, because keep in mind, going back to what I said before, the staffing agency is their services are employed by an organization, right? And that organization expects the staffing agency to only present top-notch, presentable candidates and talent for whatever position that they're needing help with. So putting your best foot forward is highly effective, very, very important, and highly effective as well in creating a great impression, so that the agency feels confident in presenting you for the role, right? So don't underestimate the importance of the meeting. Be prepared to speak about yourself and your professional experience. This is a mistake I've seen a lot of candidates make as a recruiter. You need to make sure when you're speaking about your background, your skill sets, your experience, your projects, your achievements, and all of that, don't forget to hit those keywords, right? Just like I mentioned before, recruiters, technical recruiters, IT recruiters, very much they're always paying attention to and listening for the keywords, right? Because keep in mind, not all tech recruiters are going to come from a technical background. I myself, I majored in IT. I have an understanding of IT and tech, but don't expect all recruiters to have that understanding, right? And even myself, I graduated with my degree like quite a few years back, right? So I don't understand everything to the degree that all of you who are in tech and working in IT every single day might have. I don't have that understanding. I at least have a broad understanding. I have a better foundation than maybe a recruiter who does not have it come from a technical educational background. So the non-technical recruiters, so the ones who don't come from such a background, they're going to be paying attention to keywords. So that's why you want to make sure you hit those keywords, right? And if you're meeting about a specific position, make sure you review the job description or the details the recruiter gave, so you're able to highlight the most relevant aspects of your background. And again, this is strangely enough, or not strangely enough, but surprisingly enough, a lot of people feel that it's perfectly fine to let the resume do all the work, but that's not the case. You need to be an expert on your own resume, folks. So take the time to run the recruiters through your experience, select those standout projects and accomplishments, and be able to run them through what you achieved at each position, what your accomplishments were, what your achievements were, because again, don't expect your resume to do all the work for you. The sole purpose of your resume is to get that initial phone call. It's up to you beyond that point how to handle the rest of the interview cycle, right? It's up to you to sell the recruiter on who you are on the phone, and convert that initial pre-screening to like an in-person meeting or a video meeting, or getting you yourself submitted to their client. So be an expert on your own resume. Be able to speak about how you're able to speak about all your projects, your achievements, your accomplishments, and all that stuff. Be an expert on your own resume. It's your resume, folks. You got to be the expert on it, right? So always keep that in mind and practice going over your resume. Always determine the next steps before leaving. Look, you have a phone call or a meeting or a video meeting with the staffing agency recruiter. Always determine the next steps. So you got to find out from the recruiter, okay, what happens from this point onwards? What's it going to be? Are you going to present me for the role? What are the next steps going to be? What's the interview process going to look like? How soon is your client going to get back with feedback? always determine the next steps, folks, because this is going to leave you out of mystery. A lot of you, and I see this from candidates on LinkedIn posting about it all the time. And usually when I ask people about this, they say, oh no, Dean, I didn't ask what the next steps were. Well, folks, you got to ask the next steps, because at least you get a clear idea of what to expect moving forward, right? So you got to determine, after the recruiter says, oh yeah, we like your profile, we're going to present you to the client. Well, what happens beyond this point, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter? This is what you need to find out, folks, as a candidate for the role. So have a list of questions you're going to ask that'll help you determine what to expect moving forward, right? How soon is the feedback going to come back? How many interviews are there beyond this point? Are you going to keep me updated, Mr. and Mrs. Recruiter? Should I be the one following up with you, or are you going to follow up with me? These are things you got to figure out, folks. So make sure you ask those and determine the next steps. And make the most of your visit. Look, if you're visiting in person at a staffing agency, remember, like I said before, there's different teams within staffing agencies. So you might want to ask your recruiter contact if there's anyone else that they can introduce you to at their agency. If it's a video meeting, or even if it's a phone meeting, absolutely, you can ask the same thing if it's a staffing agency recruiter. Because again, there's various teams within the staffing agency. So you want to find out and maximize your building those relationships with the right people within the agency. So find out who else you can meet. Ask them if there's anyone else they can introduce you to who might be on a different team that might also be interested in speaking to you regarding your value as a candidate. And in regards to follow-up, keep in touch. I already kind of touched on this, but look, if you're already employed, if you're currently working, you should be keeping in touch with your recruiter contacts, right? So keep a calendar reminder to reach out to your recruiter contacts every quarter, as I mentioned over there, to update them on your accomplishments. Now, why is this? Because recruiters come into contact with many, many candidates, folks. If you speak to a recruiter today and you call them again like a month from now, it's possible they might not even remember who you are. But if you keep in consistent contact, right? So you speak with a recruiter, you stay in touch with them, and then every quarter you keep updating them on what you're currently up to, what projects you recently completed. Then they're going to start remembering you. They're going to start thinking about you, and guess what? When a role comes up, that's the ideal fit for someone with your skill set, you will be one of the first people the recruiter thinks of. And I'm speaking from personal experience. There are certain people, IT professionals in my network who are constantly keeping in touch with me. And eventually reaches a point where even if they don't reach out to me for some time, I still remember them, because initially, during the initial stages of the relationship, they were in frequent contact. So I remember them. It's not difficult for me to remember them, despite all the many people I might be speaking to as a recruiter. So this is where you need to keep, again, if you're employed, that does not mean you don't need to do this. Like, you need to keep in touch with your recruiter contacts. What you want to make sure is that when something does come up, that you are one of the first people they think about in your field, in your skill set, that they want to present the opportunity to, right? That's a very important thing. So make sure you keep that in mind. Next tip, be proactive when in an active interview cycle. This is very important. Make the recruiter's job easy, right? Set realistic expectations at your end. If after the interview, for example, you're not interested in the role anymore, you feel it's not the right fit for you, be upfront about it, be transparent about it. Let them know. You don't want to waste their time. You don't want to waste your time either. Say what you mean what you say. Get back when you say you're going to get back. Any required information, especially early on in the interaction, before they had to present you for a role with their client, they might request you to make changes to your resume or submit some additional documentation, whatever it is. Provide any required info as soon as possible. And actually, not just at the beginning, but even at the latter stages, when you're at the offer stage, they might be asking for a whole bunch of information, right? Like your copy of your ID and your that personal information stuff, references. Maybe some organizations want to verify your background, do the whole criminal check and background check. Well, most organizations do, I would hope. And maybe your certification and stuff like that. Get all that info in as soon as possible, folks. It just makes the recruiter's job easy and helps them expedite things and get you moving forward in the process as well. So it benefits both you and them. And set the communication rules right at the gate. I kind of already mentioned this, but you want to make sure that you establish with your recruiter contacts, who's responsible for follow-up, who should be following up. Like, should I be following up with you, Mr. or Mrs. Recruiter, or will you be following up with me? How often will you be following up? Will you be keeping me updated? How often can I expect updates? And all these things, and you need to establish this up front, folks, so you're not disappointed or don't have unrealistic expectations later on in your relationship with the recruiter, right? So you need to figure out all these things and ask these things up front, so that there's a solid understanding for both parties, yourself as well as the recruiter, as to how this relationship is going to be moving forward, at least from a communication standpoint. Now, as a side note and follow up, again, recruiters representing you who are non-responsive, that's definitely unprofessional in my opinion. As a staffing agency recruiter myself, when I'm my first responsibility is definitely to the candidates I'm actively representing through an interview cycle. My personal philosophy is, look, good news, bad news, no news, I keep my candidates always 100% updated on where they stand, whether the feedback is good, bad, and they take it the wrong way. It doesn't matter to me. It's my responsibility to keep candidates I represent informed about where they stand throughout the process. So my opinion is, especially staffing agencies, if who are representing you as a candidate, if they're ghosting you or they're not getting back to you and all that stuff, my opinion, that's highly unprofessional. That being said, folks, and again, I'm not saying that it's right to do that, but that being said, don't take it personal. Don't dwell on it. Don't get worked up on it. Don't get upset. I understand you put a lot of time into the position and preparing the interviews, catering your resume and all that stuff. And obviously it's very unprofessional when the recruiter doesn't, suddenly is not totally non-responsive, right? I totally get that. My point here is, don't let that get to your positive attitude, because it's going to affect your positivity in the job search. So just forget about it. Just move on to some other opportunity. Move on to the next recruiter, right? I'm not going to say, cut off the recruiter, never deal with them again. I mean, maybe when you're at a senior level for those of you who are at a senior level in your career, you're probably in a position to do that, where you get to choose who you want to, work with as a recruiter. Those of you who are junior or maybe more earlier on in your career, I mean, some of these recruiters, they might have other opportunities that they might be able to present you with at some point in the future. And I don't want you to lose out on those opportunities. So while it is unprofessional that they ghost you and stuff like that, and again, I don't agree with it. I never do it myself. But don't expect every recruiter out there to operate under the same mode of operation, right? And keep in mind that in most cases, it has nothing to do with you. And again, that does not justify handling the relationship in that way. But usually, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do something totally nothing to do with you. Probably has to do with their client, if nothing else. So just wanted to let everyone know about that. Now, tip number 6, and as I start to wrap this up. And this is probably, I already kind of mentioned this in the beginning, but look, you always got to keep pursuing other channels, folks, right? And what I mean by that is, never depend on a recruiter to find you a job, right? I already covered this from the get-go, right at the beginning of the presentation, because again, this goes back to what I mentioned before in terms of the sole purpose of a recruiter. The sole purpose of a recruiter is to find talent for their client, or talent for their organization. The degree to which a recruiter can assist you is dependent on what's available or what's open in their pipeline. So going from this, never, folks, never depend solely on recruiters to find you a job. Okay, if there's one thing you want to take away from this session that I want all of you to know and be aware of, is never depend solely on a recruiter to find you a job. Using recruiters should be just one of your many channels and tools in your arsenal, right? It should be one of your tools, right? You're building a house. You got a hammer, you got the nails, you got the screwdrivers, you got the, what else? What other tools are there? The pliers, the spanner, and all these other things. Just like that, recruiter should be one of your tools. It should not be the only tool you use, right? But you want to, that being said, you want to maximize each of these tools, right? So, and the one that I'm talking about obviously right now is recruiters. Point is, do not depend solely on recruiters. You will be disappointed. You will get disappointed, because again, this goes back to my definition of the sole purpose of a recruiter. So keep this in mind. Yeah, I already kind of covered this second bullet here, but basically, yeah, just like I said, keep using other avenues in your job search, right? And the term I used before is, when I started the presentation, you need to use a multi-pronged approach, folks. Every single avenue available to you: job boards, staffing agencies, corporate recruiters, LinkedIn, what else? Networking, professional networking, career coaches. There's so many different avenues, right? Folks, you got to use all the avenues available to you. That's the closest thing, pretty much the closest thing to a magic bullet. Well, actually, I would say the closest thing to a magic bullet would probably be building your brand on LinkedIn. That's definitely the most powerful thing. but I'm not covering that in this session. But pay attention to that as well. I mean, put some effort into that as well, folks. But look, there's no magic bullet. The magic bullet is using all of the bullets. You need to use all of the bullets, right? So again, LinkedIn, direct applies. These are all the avenues. Networking, brand building. I already mentioned brand building just now, etc. All these various things, right? Because there's so many different avenues, right? And recruiters, corporate recruiters, staffing agency recruiters, these are one of your avenues. So you need to use all of the avenues to successfully conduct your job search, right? And that's how you maximize your chances and make yourself as visible as possible in the job market. Now, just a heads up, and I'm not going to go into a full-on pitch here or anything, but I am currently collaborating on a job search bootcamp where we're actually covering all these various aspects, including how to utilize recruiters effectively. So look, if you're struggling in your job search, feel free to reach out to me, give me a shout. I'll be happy to share with you more information about the bootcamp. We pretty much cover everything from resume creation all the way through to offer negotiation, everything in between. So if you're interested, feel free to give me a shout, folks. Be happy to provide you with more information on how we can help, how myself and who I'm collaborating with on this bootcamp specifically and only for IT professionals. So give me a holler, right? If you want to know more information, I'll be happy to help you out with that. And look, as a final closing, well, I don't know if this is the final bullet, but look, keep building relationships with the recruiters, folks. It's all what I said so far about not depending on recruiters, definitely true. But when it does work, folks, it just takes so much extra stuff out of your job search. And it's such an easy way when you have a good relationship with a recruiter. They present you with the perfect opportunity, perfect being there's a perfect mutual fit. It's just so much easier for you as a job seeker because you get to bypass these hundreds and hundreds of other applications and hundreds of other job seekers who might be competing for the same role. The recruiter takes care of the conversation with the client, right? I mean, of course, you got to handle the interview, but the offer negotiation, following up, when the organization pushes back on your salary and that kind of stuff, pushing back on the organization on making a decision to hire you, all that stuff. The agency handles all of that on your behalf, and it is definitely a great relationship to have when you find the right recruiters out there, and when there's a great mutual fit, right? So you got to have these realistic expectations, guys, right? So again, to kind of wrap it up, keep these realistic expectations in mind, right? Again, do not depend solely on recruiters, but when it works, it takes a lot of a hassle out of your job search, and it's just a really easy way for you to get in front of decision makers and hiring managers and get yourself those offer letters that all of you deserve, right? So that's pretty much my presentation, folks. I hope this was informative and helpful. I hope it wasn't information overload. I know I went through a lot of information. I'm now going to open it up to some Q&A. Appreciate all of you tuning in. And if you want to connect with me, all my social media links are on my website listed there. Right. So it's again, www.deankulaweera.com. I know my last name is a little bit tricky, but hopefully all of you, maybe take a screenshot of this, take a picture of it on your phone and type it in your browser later on. And all my social media links are there. I'm happy to connect with all of you on all those channels. And again, I think that's the presentation. And going back, let me just stop sharing my screen so I can open up. I'll open up the floor to questions. So hopefully that was very very informative, folks. And feel free to put all of your questions in the comments. I'm going to go through the questions right now. And actually, let me go through the questions right now. So let's see here. So folks, feel free to put your questions in the comments. If there was any questions I've already answered in the presentation, I'll definitely let you know. Let's see here. So we got so Anuj Tripathi says, how to identify the who is right? So Anuj, I'm not sure if you're asking about from the recruiter's perspective or the job seeker's perspective. I'm gonna assume you're asking how to identify who the right recruiter is. So I've kind of already gone through that, Anuj. I guess you might have asked this question maybe earlier on in my presentation. But again, the best way to find out, folks, if of course, is over the phone. If you call into the staffing agency, you have that conversation with the recruiter over the phone, you can figure out very quick whether they indeed recruit for your skill set, right? Now, the other way is you can also, again, like I mentioned, do some research on their LinkedIn profile. If you research them, you go to their LinkedIn profile, look at their LinkedIn activity, you can pretty easily find out what kind of roles they frequently recruit for. And this will give you an idea as to whether it makes sense for you to keep in touch with them. Because, for example, if you're, again, the example I use, if you're a Java developer, you look at their LinkedIn activity history, you see that they're constantly posting Java dev roles, probably makes sense for you to keep in touch, right? So hope that helps, Anuj. Great question. Andre says, how can we get in touch with the right recruiters? I'm a product specialist, sales, or product consultant. It happens to me when I say IT people think I'm a developer, which I'm not. Yeah, so Andre, this is where you got to do some legwork and research, my friend. So you got to, so folks, all of you need to do some research after today's career fair. Identify the top recruiting agencies who specialize in IT in Toronto, in the GTA. And that'll be the best starting point for you to figure out who you can reach out to, which agencies might actually recruit pretty frequently in your skill set. And that'll help you identify, Andre, who you can get in touch with that might be the right recruiter. So thanks for your question, Andre. We got Swati here. Swati says, what is the best strategy? A lot of time, it takes a long time to connect the right recruiters. Even within the company, there are different recruiters who focus on specific skills. Yeah, absolutely, Swati. So look, folks, it's not going to be rainbows and ponies all the time, folks. Like, you might have to do some research, you might have to do some legwork. I know it's not ideal, guys. Like, a lot of you, obviously, there's a lot of work to be done. You got to work on your resume. You got to identify the companies you want to work for and all that stuff. So this is where the planning aspect comes into play, Swati. That's my suggestion. Plan out your day so that, for example, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., you're going to purely focus on online applications, right? And then 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., you're going to focus 100% on researching staffing agencies and identifying recruiters, sending them messages and getting in touch with the recruiters. Then after that, 12 to 1, you got your lunch break. And then, 1 p.m., you get back into the job search. Maybe 1 p.m., you do something else. So you got to plan out your day, Swati. That's my suggestion, so that you're focused. And again, you definitely need to take the time to research the agencies, which recruiters you want to get in touch with. I know it's time consuming, folks. Nothing's going to be perfect. Nothing's going to be easy, but be strategic. Be strategic, folks. All of you are strategic people, by the way, right? But if you're in tech, you're probably very, very analytical and you know about strategy. So apply that to your job search. Nizam says, I agree with Dean. Yeah, thanks, Nizam. Appreciate that. Megan says, where do you find specialist recruiters? Yeah, so Megan, going back to the research part, right? This is where you got to research. So I'm not sure what your background is, Megan. So let's say you're a software developer. You can pretty much go into Google, just type in software development recruiters, right? If you want to make it more broad, you can just say IT, IT recruitment or IT staffing agencies or IT recruitment agencies, things like that. So this is where you got to do some research, folks, right? So Hema, hey Hema, yeah, I think we're connected on LinkedIn. Hema, nice to see you here. Thanks for coming in. Hey Dean, Hema here. How to find recruiters who is hiring for your roles? Any tips? Yeah, so Hema, just like I mentioned, first of all, identify the recruiter, folks. Identify the recruiter first and foremost. Go to their LinkedIn profile. Scroll down to LinkedIn activity. Go to see all, and then you'll see the history of their posts. And most recruiters will frequently be posting job opportunities, and that'll allow you to see whether they frequently recruit in your skill set. That's a big clue as to whether or to what degree they'll be able to help you out. So hope that helps, Hema. Great question. Neha says, what if the relevant recruiters do not respond to your messages? Yeah, move on to the next one, Neha. Well, firstly, follow up. Don't depend, folks. This is like a sales, sales strategy. Do not depend on just one contact. You need to follow up, right? So keep following up. Keep every day. Don't be pestering. Don't be annoying like that. Once a week, once every 2 to 3 weeks, follow up. Send a follow-up message to the recruiter. Don't take a non-response personally. And secondly, keep looking for other recruiters. Do not depend on just a handful of recruiters. You need to build a pipeline of many recruiters you can reach out to. This will keep you motivated. This will help you in not taking the non-responses personally as well, all right? So thanks for that question, Neha. Good one. Marcus says, what would be the best way to understand what is the recruiter focus at the moment? Yeah, I kind of already touched on this, Marcus, but again, look at their LinkedIn activity. Look at their LinkedIn post history. This will give you an idea of what they're recruiting on. Steven says, I tried walking into a major recruitment agency once and was turned away, told to apply online and was not able to speak to anyone. Are walk-ins an obsolete practice today? Steven, I'm so glad you mentioned this. Steven, personally, it disgusts me when I hear about candidates telling me about this. It legitimately pisses me off. No agency out there. If you're an agency, you have no business turning candidates away that took the time to get dressed, get ready, and came in to meet with your agency. If you're an agency doing that, shame on you. You need to be meeting with candidates. So, like, I shouldn't have to be even telling this to the agency recruiters out there. But look, the whole as an agency recruiter, if you're a staffing agency, your sole purpose is to be making relationships and building relationships with candidates in the field, in the industry that you recruit for. If you're turning candidates away who take the time to come in and visit you, and they're in IT, for example, like someone such as Steven came in to actually meet, you need to be meeting with that candidate, whether it's even if it's just for 30 seconds, you need to entertain a meeting with the candidate, with the industry you recruit for. That's how you build relationships. For the life of me, Steven, I mean, I'm sorry you had that experience. I do not understand why some agencies do that. But I mean, working, and I recently made the switch into IT job search coaching. So I'm not actively a recruiter at the moment. But as a recruiter, whenever candidates would, we get walk-ins and people coming in unannounced or unsolicited and all of that, I'd always meet with these candidates, assuming I was free. If I was available, 100%, I would meet with these candidates. And, I just don't get why some agencies do that, Steven, unfortunately. So look, the reality is, Steven, you might experience this from some agencies, but my thoughts, there definitely are agencies out there that are very open to it. My suggestion, Steven, don't rule out the smaller agencies. The smaller agencies are much more open to, they might not have such, forgive my language, but stupid practices like that, turning away people that come in to meet with them. So Steven, the smaller agencies are they're hungry. They're looking to build those relationships. They're probably not going to turn you away. So don't rule out. I definitely feel like you mentioned it was a big, major. So folks, don't ignore the smaller agencies. The smaller agencies have great relationships out there, so don't rule them out. But thanks for sharing that, Steven. Appreciate that. Sorry if I got a little fired up there, folks, but I'm just really passionate about that. I'm very passionate about recruitment, and it just boggles my mind that agencies sometimes do this. So Syed says, could you give a few tips on getting in touch with hiring managers on LinkedIn, especially ones which have active vacancies advertised? So Syed, I'm going to have to keep the questions in relation to the topic I'm speaking about. There might be some other sessions aside where they can speak, where other speakers might be speaking about that. But if not, Syed, definitely follow me or add me on LinkedIn. I talk about everything job search related, folks. I talk about anything and everything job search related on LinkedIn. I post daily, so I'll definitely be able to, happy to respond to that question, maybe on LinkedIn side. But I want to keep today's questions to recruitment staffing agencies only. But thanks for your question. Nizam says, I think it's important for job seekers to keep their LinkedIn messages short and to this point. Imagine how many messages a recruiter receives per day. Nizam, excellent point, my friend. Completely 100% agree with that, folks. Keep your messages to recruiters concise, direct, and to the point. Again, you don't want to write a whole thesis. This is not your graduation or wedding speech. Keep it concise, direct, to the point, so that the recruiter can get as much information as possible within like 15, 20 seconds of reading your message. Your message should be like 15 seconds, should be able to be read within 15 seconds max. That's probably what I would say. But great point there, Nizam. Definitely agree with that. Swati says, hi, Dean, if you help with strategy, finding the right recruiter company and right contact from the company. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean there, Swati. But like I said before, you got to do some legwork and some research. Marco said, what would be the best approach for entry-level candidates? Yeah, so for entry-level candidates, Marcos, so maybe, I'm not sure, maybe you're a new graduate. So maybe as a new graduate, you might not be able to highlight your professional experience to the recruiters. So that's where you got to highlight your academic projects, what work whatever the projects were, what you did, what your involvement was, what results you were able to get, and all that stuff. So if you don't have the professional work experience yet, folks, if you're an entry-level candidate, you want to focus on your school projects, your academic projects in your discussions with recruiters, right? Now, realistic outlook for all of you out there. Most staffing agencies primarily recruit for the intermediate to senior level, right? And again, I'm generalizing here. There might be some exceptions to this, but for the most part, agencies recruit for intermediate to senior level positions. That's the biggest chunk of the agency's business. So keep this in mind and have realistic expectations. So thanks for your question, Marcus. Great question. We got Robert here. Robert says, hi, everyone. I'm happy to meet you. I'm a recent graduate of Durham College in computer systems technician. Awesome. Shout out to Robert. Hey, anyone can help Robert out, feel free to help him out. Pranav says, in regards to having experience in the underlying country, why is there a significant difference between the recruiters and companies in Canada versus the US? Yeah, Pranav, if there are differences, I'm not sure, like you didn't really mention anything, so I'm not sure what those differences you're referring to are. So feel free to clarify in the comments. Diana says, great tips on how to work with recruiters from an IT recruiting expert. I appreciate that, Diana. Make sure to check out Dean's LinkedIn live interviews. They're really good. Yeah, thanks so much, Diana. Appreciate that. Diana was actually a previous guest on one of my live streams, folks. So make sure you check out and follow Diana as well. Awesome, great content as well. So make sure you check out Diana on LinkedIn. Neha says, I agree with you, Diana. I have attended many live sessions of Dean, and they're so practical and on point. Oh, I appreciate that, Neha. I really appreciate that. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Diana and Neha. Diana says, stay in touch with recruiters to be in top of mind. Absolutely. Absolutely, folks, 100%. And by the way, just to share a quick story, Diana, when Diana was a guest on my show, and Diana, by the way, used to recruit for Google. I believe it was Google, where she said, where the recruitment cycles, by the way, is really long, right? And she said that she had some candidates that, even despite the length of the recruitment cycle, consistently kept in touch with her. And she was a corporate recruiter, by the way. They frequently kept in touch with her consistently. And after a few months, when finally I think the hiring process, everything got the check marks and they went ahead, she first reached out to those candidates who kept in touch. So this is what I'm saying, folks. Do not take a non-response, or do not take a delayed response or lack of feedback personally. Do not let your ego get in the way, folks. Do not let your ego get in the way. Keep in touch. You never know. If you keep in touch, the recruiter might get in touch with you after a month or two and say, hey, you know what? Apologies for getting budgetary issues. We had some internal changes within the company, which, by the way, had nothing to do with you. Well, we're ready to move ahead now. You've been keeping in touch. Let's continue the conversation. What if that happens, folks? Right? So don't let your ego get in the way, all right? But let's see here. So we got Dexter says, if I only know Java and the recruiter job postings require C# developers, can I still reach out to that recruiter or apply to the job? Yeah, Dexter, you can certainly reach out, but whether or not it makes sense to reach out, I'm not sure, Dexter. Given that they're looking, if it's a C# development role, and that's the key skill set, that's what they're looking for in someone for the role, they might not consider you. So just a realistic outlook. RJ Centeno says, definitely informative. Thanks, Dean. Hey, no worries, RJ. Appreciate that. Clement said, this was very informative. Thanks a lot. No worries, Clement. Appreciate that. Alex says, thanks for the tips. No worries, Alex. My pleasure. Hema says, hi, Dean. What is the difference between recruiters and hiring manager? Who is more responsible? Yeah, definitely the decision maker is the hiring manager in most cases, Hema. The recruiter does not make the hiring decision. The recruiter's sole purpose is to find the talent, folks. Find the talent, manage the interview cycle, handle those negotiations, those awkward conversations and stuff like that. The hiring manager's sole purpose, first of all, their sole purpose is, even though we call them hiring managers, their sole purpose is not hiring, actually. Their sole purpose is probably something else, right? Look at a software dev manager, right? Is their sole purpose hiring? No. Their sole purpose is to manage the dev team, be involved in the software dev projects they're involved in, making sure they do all those various aspects within a software dev team. That's their core function. That's their core focus, right? But that being said, they are definitely the decision maker. They're the ones who pretty much decide, okay, we're going to go with this person or not. They might even be the ones that sign off the checks and approve the budget and all that stuff. So from that standpoint, Hema, definitely the decision maker is the hiring manager, right? So keep that in mind. Dwayne says Twitter link on www. Should be. Oh, okay, yeah. So thanks. Appreciate that heads up, Dwayne. So Dwayne said, so looks like I didn't update my Twitter link on my my website, folks. So my apologies for that. But appreciate that heads as soon as I finish this session. Syed says, Dean, could you give a few tips on getting in touch with hiring managers on LinkedIn, especially ones which have active vacancies advertised? Again, Syed, this session is focused on recruitment, so I'm not going to cover that. Joshua says, where can we download the slideshow? Joshua, I'll probably, I'll probably upload it to my LinkedIn profile. So make sure you follow me on LinkedIn. Bamki says, when following up with recruiters around every quarter, should we try to speak with them on phone or through message? Go for both, Bamki. I would say definitely use both, phone or messaging. Robert says, what would be a positive approach for an entry-level computer systems technician? Not sure what you mean by positive, Robert. So your question's a little bit broad there, so I'm not sure what you're asking. Gaurav says, would you recommend applying for jobs that require 2 to 3 years in SQL, but you only have 1 year SQL experience in an academic setting? Depends, Gaurav. Again, depends. If you have 1 year experience and it's pretty thorough and intensive experience with SQL, I mean, I guess it doesn't hurt to try out. But I mean, if the sole the primary requirement for the role is SQL, and they want someone who has 2 to 3 years of SQL experience, then that's what you kind of got to make that. I mean, again, it depends on the role, the requirements, and the position. I'd say it doesn't hurt to apply, Gaurav. So I'd say go for it. Doesn't matter. Robert says, what would be a positive approach for an entry-level computer systems technician to enter the post-COVID-19 job market? Do certifications really make a difference? Yeah, Robert, great question. I actually covered this in a recent live stream video. The certification definitely can make a difference, Robert, but it won't make a difference if you're making certain mistakes within your job search cycle. If you're not doing the resume right, if you're not doing the interview, if you're not handling the conversation with the recruiter correctly, you're not able to present yourself to the recruiter correctly, the certification is not going to matter because you have other things you need to fix in your job search approach. So make sure you're handling your job search cycle correctly, especially in relation to your conversations with recruiters. Himanshu says, hello, everyone. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a level 2 systems engineer working for managed services. Okay, that's an introduction. So, all the best to you, Himanshu. Appreciate your introduction. Rosemary says, thanks. My background is cybersecurity. This information has helped. Hey, no worries, Rosemary. Glad to hear that. And we got Ekate says, thanks for the informative session, Dean. Yeah, no worries, Ekate. All right, folks, it looks like that's a wrap. I don't see any other questions. I hope this information was very helpful. And most importantly, make sure all of you apply it and utilize it in your job search. Again, feel free to look me up and connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my most active platform, but I'm also available on all those other social media channels. So again, my website is www.deankulaweera.com. Happy to connect to all of you. Happy to get to know all of you a bit more. And again, appreciate everyone tuning in and apply the information, folks. Apply the information. That's the important part. Don't just come here, get excited about the information. Apply what you've learned. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm here to help you. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Kerry says, great session, Dean. No worries, Kerry. Appreciate that. And glad you joined in. Thanks so much, folks. I'm going to end it off right now. And everyone enjoy the rest of the career fair. Hope everyone gets a lot of great information. And hope everyone takes the necessary steps to win in the current job market. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one.